He handled all the pressure, the starts, the safety cars. I think he was brilliant, and I don't think the team could be any more proud of him than we are. How did it feel to get the first race win of the season and an incredible 1-2? Well, first of all, I'm massively proud of what the team have achieved. To go from where we were in Bahrain, where we were a long way off, to fighting for races like we're doing now, and to come home with a 1-2, I think is incredible. I think George drove magnificently, really controlled to win the race. And Lewis, to come from 8th in the sprint race, to have the issue at the start of the race that he had with Max and to come through to second, I think was another fantastic drive. I think, when you've got a season like this, in some ways, that race win feels almost the same as some of the championship wins we've had in the past. And I couldn't be prouder of what the team have achieved and the amount of hard work that they've put in. How does a sprint race affect the way the team set up the car? Well, firstly, it makes it a massive challenge. So in practice one, that's all you've got, that 60 minutes to get the best out of the car. And then you're straight into qualifying. And a normal race weekend, you've got practice one, practice two, then we've got some time in the evening to understand and learn from what we've learnt in those sessions, do some work back in the factory, provide some answers and some ideas for practice 3 on a Saturday morning. But when you've only got practice 1, you're very limited in what you can do. So it makes it a big challenge, and it makes it more of a lottery as to what you take into qualifying. And of course, once you're in qualifying, you're in parc fermé, so there's nothing more you can do with the cars. You're very limited in what you can do. Only the front wing can be adjusted. What has changed from previous races to this one that's given us a winning car? Well, not a lot is the answer. We brought a fairly decent upgrade to Austin, and I think since Austin we've had a very good car in the races, and we've had pretty good race pace, challenging right at the front. Our issue has been getting the qualifying performance to get ourselves in a position where we can use that pace in the race. I think this weekend we also benefited a little bit from the tyres. I think the tyres suited the balance of the car that we got, and possibly also the fact that it's a sprint weekend where you've got limited time to get on top of the setup meant that we were in a better position than some of our competitors. So I think those two things combined led to a very good race weekend for us. What did George eat for breakfast? Well, whatever he ate for breakfast, I hope he has the same in Abu Dhabi and then all the way through next season. I think when you look at it, George made one mistake of spinning qualifying, and then after that, I think actually drove brilliantly. He drove brilliantly in the sprint qualifying, huge maturity to manage the car in the way he managed it to bring it through to win the race. And then in the main race itself on Sunday, I think he handled all the pressure, the starts, the safety cars. I think he was brilliant, and I don't think the team could be any more proud of him than we are. How much damage did Lewis have as a result of the collision with Max, and how did it affect the performance of the car? I think, we got quite lucky, really. I think with a collision like that, you can do quite a lot of damage to the car. As it was, there was damage, but the damage wasn't huge. And in terms of the aerodynamic performance, it wasn't something that was going to really upset Lewis's performance. And I think the fact that he was able to drive through the field, get himself back up to P2, just shows how good a driver Lewis is, but shows that the car wasn't hugely damaged. Why did Lewis stay out so long before his first pit stop? Well, the real answer to that question is, why did George come in earlier? And so if you looked at the race, what happened is George was leading the race with Perez behind, and when Perez pitted, we knew he'd have a tyre advantage. We knew because of the degradation of the tyres that Perez on the fresher tyre was going to be significantly quicker than George could go. So actually we took no risk, and we brought George in at the latest point we could bring him in and make sure that we came out in front. In Lewis's case, after the accident, what we wanted to do was to push on as long as we possibly could, give ourselves the biggest tyre advantage towards the end of the race, and that was the strategy that we were following. Having run Lewis long in the first stint, why did we bring him in when we brought him in for the second stop, even though Lewis was saying his tyres were fine? So I think if you'd have looked at the situation of the race at that point, obviously George was already pitted, the other cars that were behind Lewis at that stage had pitted, and the issue would have been if we'd have run Lewis longer, given him a tyre advantage at the end relative to George, we would have ended up coming out behind the cars that were already behind us. The tyre advantage they would have had after that second stop would have meant that they would have got in front of Lewis on track, and as a result of that, Lewis would have had to have passed them. Although I'm sure he would have done, there's always a risk when you've got to pass cars, and we decided for the benefit of the team, the 1-2 was the right solution. And given the season we've had, 1-2 was massively important for the team this year, and that's why we chose to do what we did. How does this week's performance help us prepare for 2023? Well, I think we've been saying, from the point where we knew we weren't realistically in the fight for this year's championship, that what we really wanted to do was to learn. We wanted to do is we make sure we've sort of taken all the understanding we can from this car. And I've described it a bit like peeling the layers of an onion. The first layer was the aero bouncing, which we had at the beginning of the season. The second layer was some of the ride issues that then came in after that. And what we wanted to know is there another layer? Is there something else that we needed to discover, that we needed to fix for next year's car? So that's been our main focus. And then in Austin, we came with an upgrade kit. We came in an upgrade kit that took that understanding and took the first steps of what we needed to do for next year. And since then, we've seen a good performance level from the car. Probably not quite where we want to be yet, but the right signs of the things that we need to do over the winter. And I think that's probably the most important thing that we got out of this weekend. The 1-2 is fantastic for the team, fantastic for our drivers, but actually the learning and showing that learning is turning into performance is what's really key for next year's car. What are we expecting from Yas Marinas? Well, on paper, it's probably a circuit that doesn't suit us quite as well. But then I think if you look at the result we had this weekend, we're hoping for the best. Ferrari are 19 points ahead of us, and we'd love to beat them for that second place in the championship. We'd also love to have another win in the bag. A win for Lewis would be fantastic, so fingers crossed. Thank you for all your questions, your positive messages, the love you've shown us, the support you've given us, and we'll be back for the final debrief after Abu Dhabi.